Let's look at proposition number 28 of book 7 of Euclid's Elements. The proposition says if two numbers are relatively prime, then their sum is also relatively prime to each of them. The second part says if the sum of two numbers is relatively prime to either of them, then the original numbers also relatively prime. So here we have two aspects that we have to prove. One is if AB and BC are relatively prime, then AB plus BC, that is AC, is also relatively prime to each of them. And the second part says that if two numbers are, if the sum of two numbers are relatively prime to either of them, then the original numbers are also relatively. That is AB and BC are also relatively prime. So let's take it one by one. Okay, AB and BC are relatively prime, we are given. Now the sum of these two is nothing but AC. And we are going to use proof by contradiction to show that AC is relatively prime to AB and BC. So if AC and AB are not relatively prime, that means what? That means there is some number which will measure both AC and AB since they are not relatively prime. So let me bring in D. Now D would also measure the remainder BC, again based on one of our previous propositions. So which means D measures AB and BC. But that's not possible, no? Because AB and BC are relatively prime. So our assumption was wrong. So we can say no number D measures AC and AB. Now we looked at it in terms of AC and AB. Now let's look at it in terms of AC and BC. So if AC and BC are not relatively prime, same steps. Some number D measures AC and BC, which means D also measures the remainder AB. So which means D measures both AB and BC, which is not possible because they are relatively prime. So no number measures AC and BC. So no number measures AC and AB, no number measures AC and BC. So that means AC is relatively prime to both AB and BC, which is what we had to prove. Now let's look at the second part of the proposition. The second part of the proposition says that if we are given two numbers AB and BC, and either of these numbers, if they are relatively prime to the sum, then they are also relatively prime. So which means we are given that AB and AC are relatively prime. Remember, AB is one of these numbers and AC is the sum of these two numbers. Okay? So it says if that is the case, then these two numbers will be relatively prime. So which means we are going to assume the contrary. So if AB and BC are not relatively prime, then that means some number D measures both AB and BC, which means D also measures AC. So which means D measures both AB and AC. AB and AC. Remember, we are given that AB and AC are relatively prime, which means no number D measures AB and AC. What does that mean? Since we have reached a contradiction, it means our assumption was wrong and AB and BC are relatively prime. So that is proposition number 28 of book 7 of Euclid's Elements. Again, let me remind you, there is a link to a PDF book which describes all these propositions in detail. Please feel free to download it, refer to it. And if you think somebody else can also benefit from it, please do share. That's it for now.